Hi, everybody. What's going on? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching Sit Down. The L Generation Q coming back for season 2 on Showtime. Sheng is here with us. What's going on? How are you?
Doing all right. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great. Listen, this is a show that has resonated over the course of many, many years, and the new iteration has been awesome. So, what are you most excited about when it comes to season 2?
One of the things I love so much is that we really get to explore queerness and all of its many facets and knowing that we can't ever show all of them, And so with that in mind, I'm very excited for Micah's journey and experiencing more outside of what he's already, outside of his journey that he's already been on and kind of exploring new paths and realizing more and finding more out about himself and leaning into that and embracing it.
What do you think is most fascinating about having a character like Micah on TV? And like you said, you can't have every single experience, but this experience is super important here.
Sure. I think something I'm really grateful for is understanding that, as we move forward and progress for trans representation and especially trans masculine, trans men representation, for me personally, it's huge to be able to tell a story of a trans man of color, and kind of explore his experiences and understand that his race is very much a part of him and that everything he experiences is as a whole person. And that's so important to me. It's an honor to be able to tell that one story and show that one journey of an East Asian trans man.
And this is something you live every single day. It's another thing to put it on TV. What don't we talk about enough with the trans experience that you really want to focus on here?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing especially is just that there's no single trans experience. I think that's what we're seeing, hopefully, and start in understanding and talking about in a more mainstream way, is that when we have these stories on screen, they're really individual stories. And I think that there's a lot of pressure that can go on into not just myself, but I think in terms of anyone who's involved in that story, this idea that it's supposed to represent everybody. And it may just kind of by default do that because we still the numbers are so low of trans stories on screen, but also just leaning into the fact that it's an individual journey, and getting to really try and be as authentic as possible, whatever that means, and hopefully telling a story that people can resonate with.
One of the cool things too is that with the power of social media, people can reach out to you and discuss their stories and learn from you. I mean, what does that mean to you? Because I'm around the same age as you. We didn't grow up in a world where we saw trans people on TV. So what does it mean to you to be able to do this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the first trans person on TV that I saw was I think Max in the original L Word. I was 10 or 11, and I kind of stumbled on a scene of Max on YouTube, and among other scenes that I think I wasn't sure how I got there, and felt really nervous about getting caught as a 10-year-old. And so yeah, I as someone who's younger, and there's more stories than previous generations, and they're still very limited. There's still, for me, in a sense of predominantly white trans masculine trans men being portrayed, and so it's incredible. It's such an honor and it's such a gift. And I've received a lot of messages from, not just East Asian trans guys, but parents of trans kids and friends of people who just came out as trans, or, wanting to be a better friend, family member, parent, ally, and asking best ways to do that. And obviously what I say is going to be different than another trans person. But that's one of the most rewarding pieces of this, is just that it's really making people think and oh my gosh, this is what someone might be feeling. How can I be there for them?
That's really beautifully said. We all go on journeys in life, and it's certainly a journey to be an actor in the entertainment space. What have been some of the challenges you've overcome, and what are you most proud of so far?
I overcome feels very some of the challenges I've navigated, I don't know if I've ever really succeeded in overcoming anything. A lot of them are just kind of what is it like to be one of the only trans voices in a room, or one of the only trans people of color in a room, and also balancing the privileges that holds in some ways. As a trans man, I feel like I do have privileges that unfortunately trans women don't always have in spaces. If I'm in a space where no one knows I'm trans, I'm able to move around that room and be perceived as a cis man. And there are definitely social privileges that come with that. And so how do I assert my identity and bring my full self to each project and each space, and like make sure my full self is seen. And also like then what privilege, you know, the privilege I do have if something is said or something doesn't feel quite right, using that and speaking up. I think like as more spaces in Hollywood are really putting an effort to not just like diversify a room, but like really bring in voices that need to be represented. What does it look like when in other spaces that's still kind of a work in progress, and again being the only blank person in that space.
Do you remember where you were when you booked a part for this show? Because you mentioned you watched the original and then you get to be a part of this one. Can you give a little story here?
I was back in Michigan, and it was May 30th when my manager told me, like, she called me, she's like, "Are you sitting down?" I was like, "I am." Oh my God. And it was incredible. It was, I mean, I had done an independent film, and it was a really incredible experience, but I've never done anything like this. So I didn't know what to expect. And I just remember being just in shock. I was like, no way, no way. Yes way. And here we are 2 seasons later, you know.
It's really incredible how it can happen like that. So whether it's this show, I know disclosure was something that was super important to you, and there are other folks from that have been discovered. So what did it mean to be a part of that one as well?
That was, I mean, as somebody who, when I always say, like, I've entered this world as an audience member, you know, I was in grad school before this. I was not involved in the industry. Like I only knew what I felt about seeing particular scenes and characters, and I didn't know how far back it went. You know, between not being a historian and also kind of being a little more aware of more contemporary, I guess, within the last 20, 30 years, but also not necessarily seeing as many of those depictions. I was very ignorant of our history on screen, and so this, you know, this was disclosure was. I am blown away by what the crew was able to compile, and Sam and Laverne and Amy and everyone involved. They put together such a beautiful and like at times heartbreaking piece, you know, and it was an honor, a massive honor to be involved in that.
So if you didn't do acting, what was the backup plan for grad school?
Social work. I finished 1 out of 2 years of my master's in social work, and that's where I thought I'd be right now. I would have graduated and been, I don't know where I'd be right now, but yeah.
Isn't that funny? You think you're going one path and then one thing changes and then all of a sudden you're doing something totally different. It's crazy.
It is.
When people check out season 2, whether they've watched the show for years, they're just tuning in for the first time, what do you hope people take away from it?
Something a little similar to what I said before. I just really hope that people, I think we get to expand on what it can mean to be a queer person, a young queer person, or just a queer person of any age in this world, of social media and just like interacting and like where is queer community at socially, politically, and just understanding that we, like anyone else, deserve to be treated as human, and that we feel things just as every other person does. You know, we experience life, and it just, you know, we just love, or, you know, identify, you know, look at gender differently. It doesn't mean we're any less deserving of being treated as humans.
Oh, we all deserve to be treated the same way. We all love the same way, and this is a beautiful representation of that. So, Leo, it's really nice to meet you.
I should say we love differently. We love differently than what people expect us to love. You know.
There you go. I like that. That's awesome. Leo, really nice to meet you. Looking forward to season 2, and we'll chat again down the road. All right.
Awesome. Thanks.